Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another web development video. Today I'm going to be talking about a good path for complete beginners to learn JavaScript. This is pretty similar to the path that I took, except I'm going to try to cut out all the mistakes that I made. But I want to go through things kind of a step-by-step path so that you could follow them or maybe incorporate them into your learning process and hopefully avoid any trip ups or mistakes. But before we get into this, go ahead and give me a subscribe if you like this type of content so I can keep going with it. And that's all I'll ask you to do. So let's jump into it here. Really, I think a lot of people want to try to find a secret to learning code. And the best way to describe what the actual secret is to learning how to code or how to code anything is to just stick with it, to find time, make time to just continually code, and eventually you learn. That's not really a magical way. That's the way a lot of things are. You just have to continually stick with them. So using that principle, I think the best way to really learn how to code is that you need to find a path and then you need to stick to that path. You don't want to be jumping around and half learning one language and a quarter learning another language and then jumping into a framework and sort of understanding that and then maybe learning a little bit about a different framework. You don't really ever truly get to learn anything completely that way. You kind of have to know a lot of stuff. And I know that can be frustrating, especially if you start down a path and you decide you want to change it later on. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that you should be aware of when you do that, you are kind of setting yourself back a bit. And that's okay. It's just might be better for you to completely learn, Vue or React or whatever it is before you switch between the two, or completely learn the language before you completely switch. So the first resource that I would recommend if you are a complete beginner and want to learn JavaScript, it's a book and exercise website called asmarterwaytolearn.com. I can't remember the author's name. It's Mark Myers. And this is a great book because they're really short chapters. And he writes in the chapters are like 2, 3, 4 pages long. And he writes in an intro level. You don't ever have to know anything about code to do this. And then the great part about it is that he gives you a link to his site that you get with the book, and you can just go there for free and then practice in a live environment. They're all exercises and they're all simple. And his site will tell you when you did things wrong, and it can also get you answers as well, I believe, in there. So that's how I was supposed to do that. It's really a great site. I think each chapter, I think there's like 80 to 100 chapters, but they're all real short, which is perfect because if you're trying to learn a concept, just give you just enough of that concept and then you get to practice it. And I think there's about 20 practice questions. They're all, type this in. He has specific styles that you have to enter in order for his test to pass. And then if you don't pass the test, you can go back and retry it again. And you can take these challenges as much as you want. I really would recommend, it's the best way for a true beginner, in my mind, to really start to learn how to code. Because you can see, I made this thing, I solved this puzzle right here and it's live. And they're not too hard. It's really beginner friendly. So I would recommend starting there. I know he also has a smarter way to learn HTML and CSS and Python. He might have some other beginner books as well that I'm not aware of. And I should have prefaced this and all the rest of them that I'm not sponsored by any of these. These are all resources that I found on my own, and I have no sponsorship money or contact. I don't know Mark. I've never met him. I probably never will, but I really think that his book and series is a great one to start with. From there, you should probably grab Wes Boss's 30 Days of Code Challenge website and go through those. It's 30 days of code. Let's see if I have a URL for it. Yeah, it's javascript30.com. It's totally free. He gives you 30 simple projects, and you just build stuff along with him in pure JavaScript. He gives you access to the source code files so that you can actually start a project right away. You can download it on your machine, and you don't have to fumble around with the HTML elements and centering stuff. You can just jump right into building real world projects, and you can follow along his tutorial every day. And the idea is if you do it every day, then you make it a habit. And then once you've made it a habit, then from there, you're going to want to continue that habit. So I would recommend completing that course before you move on. It's a really neat little course. I know he sells a lot of courses too. I don't know Wes. I have listened to his podcast a bunch, which is great. But I really like this challenge site. It's really a great intro beginner. Like, hey, I can make cool things. I can do this. And if you have gone through the previous, read that previous book and gone through most or all of those exercises, and you'll really start to get a good idea of what JavaScript is and what you can do with it. So after that, then I would go to Free Code Camp. Now, you might have already been at Free Code Camp and gone through a lot of their stuff. That's fine. I just think that those two are a better preference to Free Code Camp, because Free Code Camp, when I went through it, and I did JavaScript and front end stuff, I did maybe half of it or so before I went to a coding boot camp. They jump you in some pretty hard algorithms and stuff. At least when I went through it, which was a couple of years ago, and I know they've changed things around, and they'll probably change things around by the time you see this video again. But it was difficult for somebody that was really new to JavaScript to kind of go through some of those challenges. It's pretty tough, and especially once you get out of those beginner challenges, they have you make some stuff, some real world projects, and that's actually pretty intimidating and pretty difficult. I would say do those, go after Wes's course, then jump in here because you already have an idea of, okay, this is what some of the stuff might look like. Maybe this is familiar. Maybe you could build off of some of the things that Wes had you build. And then go through and try to build, go through their tutorials and then try to build some of their projects as they want you to do as you go through Free Code Camp. And if you get stuck, my favorite resource for helping myself get unstuck was this cool guy. I can't remember his name right now. It's Dylan Israel, Pizza Poker Guy. You can look him up on YouTube. He's got, his channel has grown quite a bit. He goes through all of Free Code Camp. So if you get stuck, I don't understand how to do the algorithm, or I can't seem to get my project to work. I just want to build a page or complete one of the projects, or Pomodoro clock if they still have that one. He builds all that stuff, and you can follow along with him. And it's really nice to have a little bit of hand-holding at this level. Because I really do think that if you're in Free Code Camp, even with those two previous resources, if you've gone through all that stuff till now, or if you're just doing it if you just started with Free Code Camp, it is an area where it's pretty easy to get lost and frustrated and stuck. So hand-holding, I think, is a really important thing that you can get here. Even if it's just virtual hand-holding from some guy's tutorials, I really think it's important. So after you've gone through Free Code Camp, or after you've done a lot of Free Code Camp, at this point, if you've gone through these 3 steps, right, you've done a whole book and exercises, you've done Wes Boss's course, and you've done Free Code Camp. If you are working on this part-time, realistically, this is probably 6 months worth of work, give or take. I would say if you're doing anywhere from 10 to 30 hours a week, I'd say 6 months worth of work, somewhere in there. I haven't tried to calculate out myself. It might be more like a year's worth of work if it's only 10 hours a week. That's okay. At this point, I would say hop into YouTube tutorials. You probably already maybe done a couple of them, but you should have a better foundation if you've gone through Free Code Camp, or done a lot of Free Code Camp, or even some of it. And at this point, you can get familiar with how to build an application, but maybe you can't build one on your own, and that's okay. So now that you've done a bunch of these tutorials, now you can attempt to make stuff on your own. And if it's too complicated for you, you can just hit up YouTube and go, okay, how do I build this, whatever it is? How do I build this application? How do I do this? And at that point, you can really start getting your feet wet and trying to build some cool stuff, and then maybe you can do what I did and get to the point where you start trying to build on top of other people's projects. So ideally, if you are going through a YouTube tutorial, some of the people I would recommend for this, like Traversy Media, he is fantastic. Has some really great JavaScript content out there. And there's a whole host of other ones too. But I would really recommend Brad Traversy. Build one of his projects with him, and then try to change stuff on that. Even if it's just basic stuff, start with changing the text and maybe some colors of some things, and then try to maybe build out a little feature. And if you do a couple of his projects that are all in the same realm, if it's a framework or if it's something with APIs or something like that, start trying to put some stuff together. Start trying to combine some of the features that you built in this project and kind of mesh them together. And at that point, now you're starting to get to what coding actually is. You're taking something you maybe or know a little bit about and something else you know a little bit about and trying to put them together. And from there, I would recommend going to Udemy. And the reason I didn't say just start with Udemy is because a lot of those courses are great, but they're really fast and they're also expensive. If you wanted to start with Udemy, if you've already been through a couple of those courses, that's awesome. But I wanted to give kind of the intro basics first, doing the reps, doing the exercises before you just jump into learning a framework and stuff like that, or before you just grab somebody's JavaScript course, because I did that. I went through, and I didn't do it on Udemy, but I did that on YouTube. And what I found happened to me is I went through intro to JavaScript, and then I did ES6, and then I could follow along and I had all these notes, and then I went to try to build something and I forgot everything because all I had done was follow somebody's instructions on things. And all I'd done is take notes, and they hadn't stuck yet because I just hadn't done it over and over and over again, which is really that part of it. Just takes time and you have to do the reps and stick on that path. So at this point, I would say if you've done a bunch of exercises on stuff in Free Code Camp and Mark Meyer's site and Wes Boss's, build a bunch of little projects and stuff like that, and you're at the point where you want to start getting better building stuff. Now you go to Udemy. Now you have a good idea of what JavaScript is and how to use an array. And when people go really quickly through these concepts, they'll help solidify you because you've already seen them a bunch, or probably maybe even know how to use them pretty well by now. But two, now you can start really using them in cool applications and production level applications, not just beginner stuff. Like I recommend Brad Traversy because he's great at explaining stuff, but he also does things at the beginner based level. And when you hop into Udemy, a lot of these courses are great, but they don't always do things at beginner based level. They want to show you how to make these cool features. And that can be a real big jump if you've never made an application before, to go directly into making a production application. Well, if you can recreate it after that, that's awesome, but you probably can't because it's up at this level and you're probably more down here if you're watching these. So you have to kind of build yourself up there. So yeah, Udemy is fantastic. It's also a little, it costs a little bit of money. So I want to go through all the kind of free stuff first before you get into Udemy. Everything on there always seems to be 90% off, which is great. But sometimes, the courses aren't, and it's $200, and I don't want to just tell people, learn how to code, spend $200 on something that you might do for a weekend and be annoyed that you spent $200 on, and it's not for you. And that's another thing. If you've gone through all this stuff, then coding is for you. If you've gone through all this stuff and start doing Udemy courses, then coding is for you. And then lastly here, Edibit. I really like Edibit because it's great to practice the syntax and algorithms that you've learned at Free Code Camp, stuff like that. It's just little puzzles, and it's free. It shows you multiple solutions if you get stuck, and it has different levels of challenges, and even it has different languages, but a lot of JavaScript stuff. It's got stuff from very easy to hard, and it's more about recognizing problems that you've seen before. It's not a memorization thing, right? So you're now at the point of trying to figure out problems, and if you can spend some time every day or almost every day trying to solve these little challenges, you're going to get way better at JavaScript. And if I didn't mention it, which I don't think I have yet, Edibit's great because they show you the answers. It's so frustrating if you go look at some whatever it is and you can't figure out the answer, and I can't, I'm so frustrated, I don't understand this. If you can look up the answers, be honest with yourself. Don't just start with the answers, but if you try it and you can't figure it out and then look up the answers, that's how I do it, that will really help you. And that's why I like Edibit so much, because there are answers on there, and they're user submitted answers, and there's a bunch of them. there's a whole page of different user submitted answers for most of the challenges on there. So you can go, oh, that I didn't know I could do it that way, or I didn't know I could do it this way. So that's great. So I highly recommend Edit after you get to this point, because now you're at the point where you kind of can build some stuff out there on your own, and now you just need to keep getting the reps of the syntax, and so you can really get that down. So lastly, at this point, you've probably spent, if you're full-time doing this, this is probably 6 months worth of work. If it's part-time, it's probably more like a year. But at this point, you're getting pretty good about being able to write some code. You're probably not the world's best coder, but that's okay. Keep at it, right? This is the last step. You just have to keep at it. It's about taking the time, and at this point, you've gone through everything that I basically did, minus a coding boot camp. At this point, I inserted a coding boot camp before Edit, but I wish I had done Edit before I went to a coding boot camp. And at this point, you're okay, but you still need to spend a lot of time coding. And it's really about the journey at this point and not about the destination, right? Programming is all about continuous learning. And if you've gone through this path, then hopefully, and taking notes on this, hopefully you'll remember this advice where it is the journey, it's not the destination, and that you have really done something if you've gotten that far, gone through all this stuff, or even done half of it. And not to say that you can't go on your own detours. I just wanted to give my advice on some of the great free resources and a good path that can really get you to help get you to learn JavaScript. So don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.